right. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to SerenityOS office hours. It is Friday, and it's 4 p.m. in Sweden, so we're going to do what we always do and talk about SerenityOS. Now, usually at the start of the stream, I have to wait for some sign of life before I feel confident that we are up and running. So if you can hear and see me, please let me know. Also, before I started streaming, my wife made fun of me for always starting the stream by saying that I don't know if you can hear and see me. So now I feel like I have to say it so that she can make fun of me again. All right, good. Everybody is here. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. All right, so a bunch of things this week, but if you're new to the stream, the format we usually do is that you ask anything about SerenityOS or the related projects like Yakt, the programming language, and Ladybird, the web browser, and we just talk about whatever you bring up. And we can do technical investigations or more thoughtful things as well. It's all up to the audience, basically, is what I'm saying. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. Alex, John, Aniket, Samuel. What's up, Slendy? So In Alone says, good afternoon, Andreas. Thoroughly enjoyed your Reddit CSS video the other day. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that as well. I think it went okay, although I made a small number of dumb mistakes in the sort of in the hacked together font selection algorithm where we pick like which font to download and which one to skip, that people then pointed out. That's it's something that's really fun about posting these programming videos to YouTube, is that I then get told repeatedly about the dumb mistakes that I make, and it's very humbling, right? Because you can't pretend like you didn't make the mistake because everybody's seen it. I don't know. I really enjoy that process of humility, I guess, because to be honest with you, in the beginning, I struggled a little bit when people would point out my mistakes. I thought, oh, this is kind of embarrassing, but over time, it now makes me feel better, of course, because we get to find bugs and fix bugs. Anyway, just something of a personal development I've gone through since starting the YouTube channel, I think. Let's see. Shantanu says, does Serenity already have a boot up splash logo? Not really, no. And people have made boot logos sometimes. Oh shoot, I don't have a disk image. Let me make one. But the argument against boot splash logos is that we boot so fast anyway, or we want to boot so fast anyway, that having a splash would do nothing really other than increase the boot time. So I don't know. It's the same issue with a boot sound, although arguably less irritating than a boot sound for developers also, because whatever we do at boot, those of us who see the boot hundreds of times a day, we probably would get very tired of a splash screen or a boot up sound or something like that. But that's not to say that having the mechanism wouldn't be neat. And yeah, as John says, splash screens are to mask slow start times. That is completely true. That's why the splash screen was invented back in the day, of course, so that you would show something and people wouldn't think that the app was a dud, you know, that you try to start an application but nothing's happening, so something must be wrong, but actually it was just taking time. So since we don't really have slow start time at the moment to mask, I feel like it's not the highest priority. But it might be a neat thing to eventually investigate. We'll see. Let's see. Sebastian says, okay, I have a question. I love the aesthetic, but as a software developer, it scares me a bit to use Serenity as my daily driver. Do you think it's feasible? I would not recommend trying to use Serenity as your daily driver at the moment. It is far too unstable, and performance is also quite weak in many areas that I promise you that you'll care about. So it's definitely not ready for that. I mean, there's a reason I'm not myself using it, right, as my daily driver, which is just that it's not ready yet. But we're going to keep working on it and iterating and improving it incrementally until one day we will all realize, wait a minute, at some point recently, it got good enough to be the daily driver. But it's going to happen in thousands of little steps. So I'm not sure I will know when we get there, but I'll know when we've been there for a while. Let's see. The Black Mesa logo says, I'm stupid. How do I fix that? I don't know. Maybe a better diet, better sleep, and you'll wake up one day feeling less than stupid. Miso says, will Pixel Paint follow the same route as Serenity browser? So I don't know. At the moment, I have no particular interest in trying to make Pixel Paint a standalone cross-platform application. But if somebody else felt motivated to do that, I wouldn't want to get in their way. I think I guess it's less of an interesting problem for me to work on right now, and I typically just work on whatever problems I find interesting. That's why you see me doing browser stuff, because I find that interesting. But of course, the official answer to this question, any question of the same format, is that there is no plan. I don't have a plan. There's no official plan. And if you want to affect what happens with these projects, then you can participate in development and help drive it in the direction that you're interested in. Dex says TTP says, hello. Your opinion about renaming browser inside of Serenity to Ladybird to match the name. Do you still consider them different projects? That's a fair question. I guess I don't necessarily consider them different projects, although like mechanically right now they are. I think like medium term, long term, we need to share as much code as possible, because duplicating effort across two separate code bases is just silly. So we should try to find abstractions that allow us to share as much code as possible. And I guess by doing that, they sort of merge and become Ladybird. So it seems logical to me that Ladybird would be the browser on SerenityOS. It's just that right now they are two completely separate code bases as far as the UI goes, and we have some work to do in just unifying that and finding the right abstractions, I guess. Let's see. Tommaso says, I opened a pull request 14806 and it has not been merged. Oh, heavens. Well, let's see what that's about. So how do we get to that? Scaling function to move tool. All right, and what's this held up by? Tobias had comments. Okay, let's see. You made a mess. That's probably fine. 2 commits. I can't imagine that would be that much of a mess. So let's take a look at it. Since we're all here, what's the scaling function to the move tool? So when the cursor is over the lower right corner of the layer, it changes. This is to signify that the layer can be scaled by dragging the mouse. Ooh, interesting. A scale function. So you can drag to resize a layer? That is an interesting feature. Okay, so how do you do that? You extend the move tool so that it has a scaling state, and you also keep track of whether you are in a resizable or resized corner. Sure. And you decide that you're in the resize corner by, you have a sensitivity here. So is that a delta, I guess? Okay. And okay, and then we resize the layer on mouse up. That's when you commit to it. That it looks very reasonable. So what was the second commit? Scale layer and preserve aspect ratio. When the shift key is pressed, the aspect ratio is preserved. Okay, I mean that's okay. Key up. That reminds me, by the way, that it's I wanted to have the ability to press escape while using Pixel Paint to sort of abort any ongoing tool action. But a cursory look at this tells me that it's probably fine, and it's already been reviewed and approved by Tobias, and MacDo has looked at it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I trust this change, although I have to log into GitHub, and I'm not going to do that now, but we'll get that merged. We'll get that merged today. It seems good to me. Anyways, let's get back on track. So InAlone says, I think this has been brought up before, but a casual video every now and then where you just go to random fix me's and to-dos, I think would be a satisfying watch. Oh, yeah. So people, ever since like the first year I was doing videos, people have been asking for the fix me videos. And I always, whenever I hear that, I always think, that's a pretty good idea. And then when I'm about to start recording a video, I usually think, oh, what should I make a video about? And I never ever remember the fix me thing. And I always just pick something else. So I need to write that on a Post-it or something. In fact, maybe I can take care of that right now. I do have some sticky notes right here. All right. We're going to make a good old-fashioned analog note to self. Fix me video. All right. Note to self. And I'm just going to stick that somewhere where I won't forget it, like at the bottom of my screen. Cool. We'll see if it works or if it just ends up staring me in the face without me noticing. But thank you for reminding me, by the way. All right, let's see what's up. Stolas says, I implemented half of the firewall, but I can't be asked to add support for userland to allow to add or view rules right now. Would it be better to wait until that's done or just share? So in general, like if you've written some code for Serenity, please show us. Even if it's not complete, you can still open up a draft pull request, for example, and say like, okay, well, here's the kernel half of a firewall, still missing user space, and I don't have time to work on that right now. But if anybody's interested, check it out. And it's like the whole project is a collaborative effort, right? So don't worry about sharing unfinished work. I'm sure that if somebody is interested, they will help out. I might be interested in that myself, for example. So we'll see. Okay. Let's see. Slendy says, what count of processes do you think is too much on first install? For example, a typical Windows install has 100 processes at boot. That's a lot of processes. So in Serenity, we hovered around, well, in the beginning, it was less than 10, and then passing 10 made me self-conscious about the process count. And I don't know, now we're usually in the 4s. Yeah, like 40 or so at startup. And I feel like this is sort of where I draw some kind of limit. I feel like we shouldn't start more processes in this. Probably we could get rid of or consolidate some of them. Just not to remove the functionality, but to sort of make it lazier. For example, I know that we have the audio server running at boot, even though nobody's trying to play sound, that sort of thing. Like it seems unnecessary to spin it up before you have clients. And I think the technical reason why that happens, by the way, is that the little audio mixer applet, by querying the volume, like the current volume, it just forces us to start an audio server because of that. And I'm sure that there's some kind of thing we could do to avoid that. And probably the same thing applies to some of the other servers as well. Because ultimately starting processes takes time, and we want to keep that sleek boot time. You know, we want to boot in less than 5 seconds. And starting more processes is definitely a good way to increase boot time. I think somebody was mentioning that they were running Serenity on a really slow machine. I think it was Yelle maybe. And you could, like, if you boot it on a really slow machine, you can see just the penalty incurred by processes getting started at boot, because you would sort of see the terminal showing up, and then it has like an empty window title, and then it gets replaced with the real window title and stuff like that. And I don't know, it was an interesting visual. So I think 40 that we have right now is reasonable, but let's try to reduce it. That's my gut feeling. But if you asked me when we were at 30, I would probably have said that 30 is reasonable, but let's try to reduce it. So I don't know if I'm just another boiling frog here, maybe. But reducing it seems worthwhile regardless. Anyway, Yuval says, how do you separate your personal life from programming? How do you manage to keep working on Serenity when you have stuff going on in life? Well, I guess I just try to do, I try to work on something meaningful every day. And that's just turned into a habit for me. So I'm very strict with myself about, like, every day I have to do something that improves the project, whether it's technical, writing code most of the time, but also it can be like doing something with the community aspect, or writing a blog post like I did the other day because I wanted to clarify my feelings on Ladybird, and just do something every day that moves the project forward. And by having that habit that I'm super committed to, it just makes it easier to, like, I can trust myself that I'm going to work on Serenity every day, and then life is just what happens outside of that, I guess. And one thing is that if I think back on when I used to work at Apple, for example, or Nokia, whenever I would work at a programming job in an office, I would have like a lot of friends at work that I would see every day. And I think it was a lot harder in those environments to separate personal life and programming, because I would work and then I would talk to my friends who were also my coworkers, and we would talk about work a lot. And I think now it's a lot easier because the people I see away from the computer are not programmers, and they're not involved with working on the same projects as I am. So it just has a more natural separation that way. Yeah, I think that's sort of it. Let's see. Huge As says, yo, I just had my pep rally. It was pretty cool. That is a dastardly name you have there. Let's see. Oh, shoot. I am falling behind. Ayaya says, what do you think about the expression, reinventing the wheel in software engineering. I think it's one of the baddest advices that someone can give to a learner, for example. Do you mean, what do I think when people say, oh, you shouldn't reinvent the wheel? Because I think that's, like all advice, there's a good spirit to it, right? And in some contexts, it makes a lot of sense. You don't want a junior developer that you just hired to reinvent the basic things that he can just get from the library that he's supposed to be using, or the framework or whatever, because that's a huge amount of wasted effort and he's not going to do it well and it's going to be buggy and so on. Like, don't reinvent the wheel at work when you have like a ready-made component, I guess, that you can use. But you should absolutely reinvent the wheel for your personal learning purposes. And if you have something that you're interested in, like, oh, I wonder how this thing works, then implementing it yourself is one of the best ways that you can learn more about it. And I think one of my pet peeves is when people say things like, oh, you should never, ever, ever implement cryptographic code, for example. Like, you should never roll your own crypto routines because that's only for the people in the high tower that are allowed to do that. I think that's a very like anti-learning mindset to have. So it irks me a little bit when people parrot that. I think, yeah, you should reinvent the wheel if you're trying to learn something. It's a great way to learn more. But be judicious with reinventing the wheel in a professional context where somebody is paying you to be productive and they're not paying you to mess around. Yeah. Let's see. Andy Jansson says, a Fix Me video. Yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, something shiny. Yes, this is a very accurate portrayal of me 5 minutes before I record a video. It's all good. Let's see. Halil says, hey, Andreas, just would like to say thanks for inspiration. Your works give me that inspiration to continue my side projects. Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I am very glad to hear that. It's one of the best things that have happened in my life since I took the leap to like making videos online and like sharing my stuff with people, is just to hear that somebody somewhere in the world was inspired somehow, or their life was positively affected, because that never happened before, and now it happens sometimes, and it's so cool. So thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. Let's see. Dr. Ingo, 1980, says, how much in power are you still in the whole project? I mean, over the last few years, a lot of people have joined and contributed code to the project. How much hands-on on all parts? What I mean is, how much hands-on are you still on our parts of the system? Is there anything you gave up completely to others because maybe you don't like working on those parts? So I don't know that I've given up caring about any part of the system. I definitely do. There aren't many parts of the codebase that I haven't touched at least a little bit. But there's definitely areas where I spent way more time and areas where I spent way less time. And I have a lot of faith in the people that work on Serenity together with me. So I'm not, I guess I feel confident that as long as we have sort of a place for a piece of functionality that we need, then I trust the people who are more interested in it than I am to make something good out of it. And so far that has been working out really well. So I'm definitely not hands-on with every part of the system. And I tend to just focus on whatever I'm interested in improving at the moment. And since we've scaled up to so many people, the nice thing is that while it seems to me that everybody is just doing the same thing, they're just working on sort of what they're interested in at the moment. But because there are so many of us, we end up with pretty good coverage anyway. Although, of course, there are parts of the system that could use a lot more improvements, and nobody's looking at them actively. But somebody will eventually. Let's see. Redax says, what is the default TCP algorithm in Serenity? Cubic? I don't know, actually. I don't know what are the different TCP algorithms. I think when I first implemented TCP, I just did something, I just hacked around with basic understanding of the protocol and some of those state transition diagrams until I had something that could download an HTTP request. And after that, we've sort of been patching in fixes for various things, and some people have spent more time on improving different pieces of functionality, but the TCP implementation in Serenity is very much not sophisticated. It is quite simplistic, and if anybody, perhaps you, would like to improve it by, for example, implementing more of the sophisticated algorithms for better performance, there is a lot of money on the table. Like, I mean, there's a lot of performance opportunities. I know that we are doing some really dumb things at the moment. So if you just Wireshark Serenity for a while, then you can see that it's wasting a lot of time on like retransmissions that are not necessary, stuff like that. Let's see. Dr. Ingo also said, I have the greatest respect for what you have achieved in the last 2-3 years. It simply boggles my mind on how far you and SerenityOS have come in that time. It boggles my mind too. I mean, I knew that we were going to do these things, but they're happening faster than I thought that they would. I think I'm still not really adjusted to the power that comes with having so many people work on something together. And it's a really interesting effect when people sort of get together out of a strong personal interest in something and they just pour time into it. It doesn't really follow the same rules of productivity that you have in a professional context, you know, where like, oh, you have this expectation that somebody will be able to do this and that much work in that time frame, because people who are just kind of intrinsically motivated by curiosity, they work at a different pace, and it's cool. Anyway, let's see. Oop, I messed up the scroll again. Tobias says, Bonjour, Mr. Kling. How is your day? Is the weather in Sweden as rainy as here? I don't know. I have not been outside today, so I don't know what the weather is. And I'm gonna check my phone right now. This is kind of silly, but I'm gonna see if it's raining outside. It's partly cloudy. Partly cloudy. Thank you for asking. Let's see. So Jimmy says, how to break down the first big wall to start understanding the SerenityOS codebase. Is there still a super essential version to analyze? So I think the codebase has obviously grown in complexity and scale over the years, but I believe the best way to approach it is still to just pick some little part that you think is interesting and try to mess with it and understand by manipulating it. And you can sort of pick any part of the system. Like if you pick, say, the text editor, then just build it and mess around with the text editor and then change the code in the text editor a little bit, see if you can get it to behave differently, and spiral out from there. That's the same approach I always use when I need to understand somebody else's code base. I just build it and move things around, change things around a little bit, see what happens. And it leads to this sort of organic process of discovery. If you have some specific part of the system that you want to understand, then, or what am I trying to say? If you have specific questions about something you're trying to understand in the system, then by all means, ask people. You know, we have the community on Discord. We have channels for many or most of the big subsystems. Just come and ask people, and I'm sure that somebody can tell you how this or that works. Because we have new people coming into the system and learning about it all the time. So we're pretty well set up, and we're used to people asking about it. Let's see. Slendy says, oh, since I am still in a bit of a TempleOS mindset, what do you think of Alex's work on running Yakt on TempleOS? He even made a whole ELF parser to load and run his code. That is, I guess, I think that's neat. I mean, it's always neat to see something running in an unexpected environment. So I think that's nifty, but I don't really have any personal utility for TempleOS. So it's neat, but that's where it stops. But I definitely appreciate people messing with it and seeing where you can make it run and what you can do with it. Let's see. Dr. Ingo says, from one software developer to another, what are your thoughts on Rust? And apologies if you already addressed this in a separate video. So I have not really written enough Rust to have an opinion about it worth hearing. So I try to keep it to myself, because I think I'm not strong enough at Rust to praise it too much or to complain too much about anything in particular. So I don't want to taint the waters with sort of unsubstantiated opinions. Travis says, how far away do you think Yakt is from being used in Serenity? I think it's pretty close. I think it's real close, honestly. For me, now that we have some basic inheritance working, the next thing that I feel like is a deal breaker that I need to spend some time on is the compile times. And specifically, I want to make sure that the Yakt compiler can create multiple translation units. Because at the moment, it creates a single translation unit, like a single CPP file out of everything you throw at it. So if you have a complicated Yakt project, it will just compile down to a single file. And that is not great for incremental compile times, right? Because if you're building a complex app that has 50 source files, you don't really want to recompile that whole blob every time you touch one line in one of them. So that's my big remaining annoyance that I need to dig into, or need to and help somebody else who's already digging into. I don't know, maybe somebody's already doing that. I haven't really stayed on top of the Yakt issues for the last 2 weeks or so. But it seems to me that it's real close, at least for some basic stuff and just some basic experiments. And I want to personally look at using it for some library code just to increase our confidence in the safety of some of our libraries. I'm interested in experimenting with that. An empty name says, what is Logom? Logom is a part of the SerenityOS codebase that, or it's like, I don't know what to call it exactly, but it's a port, I guess. It's a port of some of Serenity to other platforms. So if you build Logom, it gives you a library for Linux or Mac OS that contains a whole bunch of the Serenity libraries. And we use this when we build our own build support tools. So we have code generators that need to run on the platform that you're building Serenity on. So if you're building Serenity on Linux, we need to compile some tools for Linux to help us generate code and other things. And we didn't want to write those in any other style than our own C++ style. So that's why we needed a port of the Serenity C++ libraries to other platforms, and that's what that is. So if you build Logom, it gets you the Serenity libraries for Linux or Mac OS, or I guess Windows if you're on WSL. Eric says, I have not received any comments on my pull request after 2 weeks. Did I do something wrong? If you did something wrong, I think somebody would have commented. It's more likely that it just fell between the chairs. So what is this? Update Ccache to version and implement mucus temps. And nobody has commented on this. Okay, so MKS temps, what is that? Something that 463 of Ccache requires. Got it. Okay, MKS temps. Is that POSIX or something else? Sounds like non-POSIX to me. Because I know mucus temp is POSIX. Oh wait, did I do MKS temp S? Conforming to? It's an unstandardized but appears on several other systems. Sure. And you have to provide the suffix len. Okay. So the string in the template provided contains a suffix of suffix len characters. Uh-huh. So essentially, it allows you to put something after the XXXXX part, I guess. I mean, that sounds useful if you want to ensure that you have a specific file extension, for example, like having the trailing random characters is annoying if you're trying to make a .png file or something like that. So seems like a reasonable API. And you have a test. That's cool. I'm surprised that you need to fork in a test for this. But sure. Yeah, I don't understand why you need to fork in a test for MKS temps. But I think it's probably okay. Yeah, right, I'm not logged in. Let me get back to you after the stream about that one. It's probably okay. I just feel like the test is maybe a bit complicated. Let's see. Marek says, how are kernel drivers implemented? Are they compiled into the kernel or are they runtime loadable modules? They are currently compiled into the kernel. We had loadable modules before, but they were not used. So nobody ever used them or worked on them. So eventually we just got rid of them to simplify the kernel a bit. But it's not terribly difficult to bring it back if one day we would want to. But right now we just build everything into the kernel. Dr. Ingo says, last question from me. Do you remember BeOS? What are your thoughts on BeOS and its reimplementation Haiku OS? I remember BeOS, but I was never a user of it. I just tried it for an hour or something like that here and there. And I've tried Haiku as well. And I don't know, something about it just does not really speak to me. So I never end up more than fleetingly curious, I guess. So it's not to say there's anything wrong with it. It just doesn't speak to me personally for whatever reason. Luna Coco says, another thing to help you get into the vibe of the codebase is to read through the diffs on reviewed/merged pull requests. Gets you familiar with that part of the system and the changes that are done to it. Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice. I think if you are interested in participating in a project, just tracking the incoming changes by following the git log and following the pull request action that's happening can be very, very helpful in sort of building an understanding of where the project is now and where it's going, and just getting into the thick of things and putting your finger on the pulse, as it were. I think that is very, very helpful. Let's see. Anthony says, that's an interesting point about Yakt compilation to a single CPP file. What are some ideas to automatically split the target to CPP header files? So the obvious idea would be something like take out every .yakt file would map to a .cpp file. That's sort of an obvious separation that you could do, and that would help our compiler already today, because we have multiple Yakt files that compile to a single CPP file, and then compiling that single CPP file takes forever. And you would already improve the ergonomics of working on the compiler if you could generate a single CPP file per Yakt file. And then more adventurous ideas would be, for example, creating a CPP file for every class. So a CPP and H pair, for example, for every class, which could then potentially allow you to only rebuild classes that change, even though maybe you have two classes in the same file, but maybe you only changed one of them in a meaningful way, and that would allow you to recompile only that class, things like that. And it is interesting because C++ definitely has build time issues, and there's a fair amount of things that you can do manually to improve C++ build time, but all of them are really tedious and they easily break. Like even if you get a build improvement by reducing the include graph or doing a whole bunch of forward declarations instead of full declarations, and there are all these things you can do to reduce compile times, but it very quickly tends to regress again as you just organically edit the code. So it is very tedious and very heavy effort to move that needle. But if you were a Yakt compiler and you were programmatically doing that, then maybe all of those techniques are suddenly a lot more valuable because you could do them automatically, right? So I am interested in alternative approaches to it. But just as a first cut, I think mapping one Yakt file to a CPP file would be the obvious first step. Let's see. Oops. Let's see. Inalone says, do you think the mixing of Yakt and C++ in Serenity, when the two mix, will have to be monitored in some way? As in, X things must use C++, Y things must use Yakt, or will it be more of a free-for-all? Well, I think there's definitely such a thing as like a low-value Yakt conversion. So converting like trivial command line utilities from C++ to Yakt is less interesting, right? It's just churn at this point, because what we should be focusing on is trying to use Yakt to improve some of the more hairy or less security confident parts of our code base. That is where there's real value, I think. And then there's a long tail of trivial things that could be converted, but I don't necessarily feel like those are the best things to put a lot of time into initially, because that will just be a bunch of busy work. And but at the same time, I'm just one person. I just do what interests me. If there are people who are really, really motivated to convert small programs from one language to another, I know that they will jump on the opportunity. So at the end of the day, it's a good thing that people do what they're interested in and not what they're told. That's one of our strengths, I think. So I'm not trying to interfere with that, but my own personal feeling is that we I want to look for real like extractable value from Yakt rather than like mindlessly converting things that are not really like high value targets in the first place. Let's see. Dr. Ingo says, I'd rather be interested in why you and JT invented Yakt instead of porting Rust over to SerenityOS directly. What problems does Yakt solve that Rust does not address yet? So I already did port Rust to Serenity and spent a bunch of time writing Rust for Serenity. I think my port is still here, yeah. Although I haven't touched it since April. But the basic issue that we ran into with Rust was that it's just not very object-oriented programming friendly, and it's not very GUI friendly. If you look at GUI programming with Rust, it's just not really figured out. It almost feels like people didn't figure out how to make GUI programming pleasant with Rust. There are a bunch of different approaches that people have, of course, because there are graphical Rust programs, but none of them look like code that I would want us to be writing for Serenity. Like for Serenity, it's very important to me that it's pleasant and easy and straightforward to write GUI code because most of the system is GUI code. So I wanted something that puts the GUI programming front and center and makes that a priority, and like working with classes that inherit from each other, which is just the number one building block in our GUI paradigm, needs to be natural in the language. And that was the main issue with Rust, really, that it was just not natural to express those types of programs. Let's see. Simon says, do you plan to move to SerenityOS to develop the system in the future? I don't really have a plan one way or the other, but it is my goal, perhaps, to one day use Serenity, absolutely. But I don't have a plan for when or how. Freeper says, why is the Serenity browser slower on Serenity and less on Linux? So that's there are a couple of different reasons, and we don't have the full answer, but it's something that we have been investigating from time to time. And I'm aware, oh shoot, I messed with the text settings. The reason that was slow on Serenity is, number one, if you're not using multiprocessor, then the browser has to share the CPU with the windowing system and the kernel and all kinds of stuff that's going on at the same time. And if you're on Linux, you're typically using multiple CPUs. Now, if you run the browser in Serenity in multi-core mode or SMP mode, it's already a lot faster. So that covers a big part of it. And then another part is that malloc is quite slow on Serenity because it's very aggressive about giving back unused memory to the kernel, whereas malloc on Linux or Mac OS, they tend to hold on to memory that you've freed just in case you want to malloc it again. And that, as it turns out, is really, really slow. The way that we're doing it is really slow. Because we kind of, you freed this piece of memory, and that means that we can give back this one page to the kernel. We probably should. Like we have a very, very small pool of pages that we will hold on to before we start freeing stuff. And that is definitely, I know that is killing the JavaScript test suite, for example. There's a big performance opportunity there. And then there's also a bunch of various little things like we have a mutex that blocks or that guards our malloc implementation. And on Linux and Mac OS, at least, I know they have thread caches for malloc. So if you're If you're mallocing, then typically malloc will go to a thread local cache before actually taking a global mutex. And I've seen we just have a global mutex for our malloc, and I've seen just that mutex sitting at like 1-2% of every profile. So there's definitely an opportunity there as well for thread cache. But then there are areas like big unknowns as well, where even if you were to remove all of these problems or account for them, there are some parts that we don't know yet why we're slower. But there are likely to be other system-specific things like our kernel, like our libc. Just needs to be investigated. Let's see. Dr. Ingo says, yeah, I totally get the GUI issue. Writing GUI code really depends on the framework you have available, and there is no default Rust GUI framework, so I totally get where you're coming from. Right. Yeah, it's a major concern, I think. You really need GUI programming to be fun and pleasant and productive, and at the end of the day, that's what I want to achieve with Yakt. Like, I want to make it fun to use it, and it shouldn't get in your way with anything, ideally. But we'll see how that pans out. Anthony said, does Serenity have any quirks about making UI updates only on the UI thread, or do the APIs not really suffer from this? You definitely have that same thing in Serenity, that you have to make the UI updates from the UI thread, from the main thread. That's just how the GUI framework is designed. Like, it's not designed to be poked around at from multiple threads at the same time. If you want to do cross-thread communication, you need to do that using either some kind of message queue or just the event system. Our event loops are thread safe, so you can create an event loop on the main thread and then push events to it from another thread. That should be safe, and that's typically how you would want to do that stuff, but you can't poke at the UI directly now. Let's see. Dr. Ingo says, this whole stream just makes me feel good. Not only is Andreas addressing almost everybody's comments, but also the users of the community are all friendly and nice, and there's no hate going around. Yes, indeed. Isn't it nice? It is my experience, at least, that the SerenityOS community is just really friendly and just really excited about programming, and very knowledgeable and curious community, and very little negativity and hate. So I'm glad that you see that, and welcome, I suppose, if you're new here. I don't think I've seen you in chat before, so glad to have you here, Dr. Ingo. And John also agrees. Let's see. Mike Poulos said, hi, Andreas. Sorry if it's a question you're tired of answering, but could you tell me which Linux operating system and desktop manager you're using? Is it Ubuntu and KDE? Close. It's Ubuntu and Mate. I think I put this in my FAQ, but I already forgot if I did. Let me look it up. Let's see. What Linux distro are you using? Yeah, so it's Ubuntu Mate. And the desktop environment is just the stock Mate that comes with Ubuntu Mate. So Slendy is indeed right about that. Leon says, are you good at math? No, not really. Not really. I have a high school understanding of math, basically. So I wouldn't call myself a mathematician by any means. Every couple of years, I think to myself, maybe I should learn more math. And then I find some programming thing I want to do instead, and I forget about it. Let's see. Right. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see. So the dump app says, hello, good weekend all around. Oh, the weekend already started for some people, I guess. Very, very nice. Let's see. Andy says, it's been a while since I last saw a profiler in a video. I enjoyed watching your optimization workflow and you making extensions to the tooling. Hoping these kinds of videos will make a comeback. I think they will absolutely make a comeback because in the most diplomatic way possible, how can I say? I think if I want to make Ladybird faster on Linux, the tools that are available for profiling on Linux are not quite as nice as the ones we have in Serenity. So I think we will definitely have to do something about that in one way or another. So we'll see. But I definitely need to work on Ladybird performance and browser performance in general, and for that we'll need to work on tools. Let's see. Pukar says, on unrelated note, what are your favorite movie genre? Oh, I don't know what is my favorite genre. But my wife asked me the other day, like, what's your favorite movie? And after thinking about it a little bit, I had to say The Terminator. I think The Terminator 1 and 2 are just the best. And whatever genre those are, I suppose, might be my favorite genre. I know James Cameron wanted it to be considered tech noir. That's why the nightclub in the first movie was called that. But yeah, I think whatever the Terminator is, that's the genre I like. Let's see. Ovlov Alova says, what is the concern with the composition over inheritance approach, which is used in Rust? The concern with that is just that it's really tedious to write code. Because when we build a GUI in Serenity, we have a lot of objects that want to do dynamic dispatch, and they want to inherit behaviors from the classes that we have to offer, and rethinking that into a Rust-style system. Like, we tried prototyping it in a couple of different ways, and all of them were really verbose, and we looked at existing GUIs. I looked a lot at Servo, the Rust implementation of a web browser, and the hacks and contortions that they do in Servo to be able to do like the object-oriented stuff required in a web browser. There's just a lot of like unpleasant boilerplate that I don't think we want to write. So I think Rust is it's a language that serves a lot of people, and it serves a lot of patterns and paradigms, but it does not really overlap with the specific types of programs that we want to write for Serenity. So it is unfortunate, but we build everything else ourselves in Serenity, so building a language is not that big of a stretch, honestly. Let's see. Undefined says, what do you think about implementing FAT32 support in the kernel? I think that might be nice. That it would be fantastic to be able to read USB sticks, right? Flash sticks. At the moment, even if we were to get mass storage support, we would still be stuck not being able to understand the file system. So exFAT and FAT32, these are definitely things that we need to support. I know somebody worked a little bit on FAT at some point, but I think it never got finished. Ali says, no matter how much math you learn, offset arithmetic will be your downfall, so why bother? That is so true. Like no matter how good you get at programming or anything, there's still gonna be like those little basic off by one things that are gonna screw you over at the end of the day. But of course, that's not a reason not to learn and improve and get better at stuff. But it is kind of funny in a way that um, even the tallest giant can still stumble on a tiny rock, you know? Let's see. Gazehound says, is Serenity aiming for complete POSIX compliance? I think no, not really. But because it's not like we're trying to religiously implement POSIX. It's more like we're trying to do much or most of POSIX, kind of similar to what Linux is doing, really. Like it's a guide to what we're trying to do. It's a good guide for what a Unix system can be, but we're not trying to like dogmatically do exactly everything the POSIX says. But at the same time, I don't really have an offhand example of something POSIX says that I don't think we should do. It's just that it's not a goal in itself, I guess, to religiously pursue POSIX compliance. And now YouTube says it would be a good time to insert ads. But let's not do that. Andre says, I love the fact that profiling is better on Serenity. I like that too. I mean, I like it a lot, but it is frustrating when you are on Linux and you would like to understand what the computer is doing. And then there are some tools, you know, there's perf and there's the hotspot GUI. But if you compare those to what you have on macOS, for example, it's a huge difference. And Serenity tries to model sort of the pleasant profiling tools available on macOS with instruments and whatnot. And yeah, it is an area where we do pretty well, and we could do a lot better by improving our profiling tools even further. You get like a cutoff recording of only the first part, which is not perfect. All right. Shantanu says, there is no Terminator movie after T2. I'm prepared to agree with you on that. Okay, Dr. Ingo says, how are you dealing with DRM content? From what I understand, the big browser makers have hidden contracts to allow DRM protected content. We are just ignoring DRM at the moment, and will likely be ignoring DRM for a long time. If we one day get to the point where there's a pressing need to implement WebDRM, then we will figure out what to do then. But I think, you know, it seems to me that we have a long way to go before that's any kind of a concern. And I'm optimistic that by the time we get there, things will have changed somehow. You know, maybe they don't change for the better, or maybe they change for the worse, but they will have changed somehow. And like trying to figure out what to do with DRM right now doesn't feel like a constructive pursuit, because we're so far from needing it for anything anyway. Let's see. Oh, Tristan says, hey, Andreas, you have built a browser, operating system, and programming language. What's next? Well, what's next is making them a lot better than they are right now, because none of them are finished by any means. We're just getting started. The operating system is obviously further along than the other things. And I don't know that I don't really have anything I want to do in addition to these projects anytime soon. You know, at the start of the year, there was only the operating system, and that it encompassed everything, right? And in many ways it still does, but I guess I felt like I wanted to add on these two new things, the language and the browser, just so that we can cover more ground in the end. And also do things in a more long-term way. That was the motivation with starting the language, was to build something that will last longer. And in some ways, that's kind of my motivation for going hard on the browser as well. That by switching my mindset from building a browser for Serenity to just building a browser period, it reframes it as something that has much greater potential value to the world, right? And even much greater potential value to me personally, because maybe I can just make a browser that I can use every day too, because I use a browser all the time. Why not make it? I don't know. In many ways, it was obvious that that would happen. I just hadn't really made the connection myself. And when I did, I just had to write it down. Let's see. Aaron Clark says, "Hi, Andreas. What do you think about doing kind of a release cycle for Serenity? Maybe a GitHub tag or something could be helpful with issue tracking and dependency management for ports." I don't know that that's really a good idea. The system is not really meant for being released anytime soon. It's very much set up in the way that you just live on the master branch, and it only targets its own developers. So making things convenient for people to consume who are not going to work on the code base anyway, it's just like it's not a priority, I guess. So I think unless there's some like really tangible value that we would get from splicing the code base into releases, some tangible value for us personally, for each individual developer, then I don't think that's particularly interesting. Senti Demern says, "I'd be fine with watching an ad right now." Yeah, I don't want to watch ads though. Let's see. BB Kane says, "Could you point me to any blog post or things to Google for pleasant macOS debugging profiling?" I don't know of any blog post about that, but I have definitely seen WWDC talks about profiling on macOS and profiling on iOS. They tend to be really, really good. So if you go and just look for talks about profiling or talks about instruments from WWDC, and I'm sure that you will be pleasantly wowed by the presentations. Berkai says, "Hi Andreas, when will we use Serenity natively? Do you have any predictions?" I do not have any predictions, but you can already use Serenity natively if you want to. There are many people who have run Serenity on hardware. I have done it myself too. I have video on my channel of me booting it on my PC. And it's cumbersome and problem prone, but it is possible. And if you are interested in stuff like that, there's the bare metal channel on Discord where people gather to talk about running Serenity on bare metal. Let's see. George says, "What's your opinion about Minix?" No opinion. Wouldn't have been a good starting point for a Unix operating system. What I'm trying to ask, why not improve on that, fork it and expand it? Well, we're not trying to fork anything here. We just build everything ourselves. That is what we do in SerenityOS. We build everything ourselves from scratch to have fun and to learn and to share the experience of building really complicated things together. And it's amazing. It's so much fun, and you can really feel all the people involved just getting better and better as we go, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. And taking an existing thing, forking it, of course you can make progress faster, but then you miss out on all the other good stuff, and that's where all the enjoyment is, as far as I'm concerned. So forking something is not something I'm interested in. Gazehound says, is it a goal of yours to be able to record and edit videos within Serenity? Of course, I want to be able to do everything within Serenity. Slendy says, what's your favorite specification? I have to say, I think the ECMAScript or the JavaScript specification is one of the best. It is so detailed and exhaustive and unambiguous in 99.9% of cases. If you look at other web specifications, compared to ECMAScript, the other ones are cowboy literature. ECMAScript is, I think it's my favorite one out of all the ones that I work with implementing. But the other ones are improving. You know, they're making strides, getting better, but there's still a long way to go before they will be as reliable as ECMA. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Dr. Ingo says, thank you so much for today's stream. This was the first one I ever actually was able to join, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I wish you the best for the future. Well, thank you for stopping by, Dr. Ingo. You definitely have a good attitude, and I'm happy that you are part of our community. And everybody else too, of course. I am really happy that all of you are part of this community because you're just so dang nice. And that's what it's all about. Sam Bowman says, joining a little late, so apologies if it's already been asked, but is the ICC setup documented anywhere? I want to make builds faster, but I haven't figured out the toolchain stuff yet. Ooh, yes, I wrote it down somewhere. Hold on, let me get you the link. I have it here. Let's see if I can make that load in Foxfire, actually. Yes, my ice cream setup. Sam. There you go. Wonder if that loads in Ladybird, by the way. We should find out. Oh. Okay. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I mean, we got some layout goofs here. And these SVGs are a little offset, but come on, not bad. All right. Let's see, what did I miss? Slendy was asking, what about the Intel 64 and IA32 spec? That's a good spec too, but it's a good spec. It is. But I feel like sometimes it's not quite as exhaustive as I would like it to be. I've had instances while writing x86 emulator code where something was less obvious than I wish it would have been. Like you had to read the text many times before you would understand what you were doing wrong. And I feel like with ECMAScript that happens not nearly as much. Anyway, Senti says gist is usable on Ladybird. Oh, that's cool, isn't it? I have to say, I had never tried opening a gist in Ladybird, and I'm just very pleased with how all right it already looks. Anyway. Venkatesh says, hi, Andreas, how are you? Or, excuse me, he says, hi, Andreas, bro, how are you? I am good, Venkatesh, bro. How are you? Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Kendog McAwesome says, just remember that I'm watching this live and not as a recording. That's true. You are watching this live, Kendog McAwesome. Gazehound says, LibWeb has come so dang far. Well, ain't that the truth? But we still have a long way to go. Something that bothers me a bit about LibWeb is once the content gets a bit complicated, resizing really starts to suffer. And there's like a whole lot of stuff going on. So it's not like one specific thing that we need to improve, but it's more like 50 specific little things that we do. And yeah, you can see here, like resizing is just sluggish. And this is exactly where a profiler would be great. And Gazehound says, browser perf video incoming. Yeah, that's definitely incoming at some point. But there's like, it's tempting to just dig into performance, but we have so many correctness issues that it just feels like it's usually a better use of time to try to improve the fidelity of web pages rather than try to make them resize fast. Anyway, Yanis Adamek with the super chat. Thank you, Yanis. I really appreciate that. Okay, with Lady Beetle or Ladybird, Ladybug saying happy Friday, everyone. Happy Friday to you, Yanis. And thank you for the super chat. It is a happy Friday, I think. So Kyle says, can you point me to where the applets are launched during startup? Dang right I can. Let's figure out how the applets are started. So we will run Serenity. And I would suspect that they are started by system server. So if you look in your users config directory, there is a system server.ini. This is your user specific sort of startup file that contains stuff that we will launch at startup. And if we scroll down, we will find applets here. So basically, when you log in, when the system boots up, there's only the login server. But we auto log in the anon user right now by default, just for convenience. So when login server logs in the user, then we load the user specific system server.ini and then get all of the things to launch from that file. And the names here just refer to executables in /bin, right? So if you add a new applet in /bin, and you can just add an entry here, you can say Kyle.applet, and it will launch. So that should be pretty good. Okay. Oh, Benjamin Phelps with the super chat. I have not seen you in a while, Benjamin. Hope everything is okay in Ukraine, if you're still there. Ben says, been loving all the new videos recently. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Benjamin. And thank you for the super chat. Glad to see you here again. Let's see. Oh, did I miss something here? Ricardo said, random question. Do you have a laptop or desktop? I have a desktop. I also have a laptop, but I don't use it very often. Zhao says, where do you think the browser's bad performance comes from? Like most probable places it could come from. So the two main sources of bad resize performance at the moment are CSS selector matching and recursive flexbox layout. So on pages that have a lot of nested flexboxes, like CSS display flex, and you have a lot of these within each other, then we do this sort of recursive traversal of the tree to perform layout, and it's very, very heavy, and there's probably a lot of work that gets done multiple times that we could consolidate and do only once. But the Flexbox algorithm definitely needs more work to be high performance. And then also selector matching tends to be really heavy, because if you have a large web page with a couple of thousand elements and you have say 10,000 CSS rules, and then you have to check for each of those elements, like which one of the 10,000 CSS rules matches the element. And that's something that we have to do a lot over and over. And there are tricks you can do to reduce the set of rules that you need to evaluate, or selectors that you need to match. And there are also tricks you can do to reduce the set of elements that you need to run selectors on. At the moment, we don't do a lot of tricks. We have a small number of optimizations to reduce the rule set a bit. I think right now though, like if you resize Reddit like I was showing, I think 50% of CPU time when I'm doing this is spent just running all of the CSS selectors against the whole document. So if we can make that faster or just do less of that, it would be quite impactful, I think. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Diego says, will Ladybird have the same visual aesthetics that it has on SerenityOS? No, Ladybird will try to look native wherever you run it. So if you run Ladybird on Linux, it will try to look like your Linux environment. And if you run it on Mac, we'll try a little bit to look like a Mac application and so on. I think that is the polite thing to do. So we should try to be good citizens and make ourselves appear native and friendly. Slendy says, seems my message didn't come through. Sorry if you get this twice, but how does old Reddit look on Ladybird? Let's find out. So here is old Reddit. Pretty decent. There are some layout issues. We are falling back to bitmap fonts in some places. It's probably something we can fix. You have some issues of text overlapping and but it's pretty close. Here's a Z ordering issue. Close, not perfect, but getting there. Adler says, hello everyone, a bit late for the stream, but I just wanted to say hi. Hello Adler, hope things are going well with you. LOL player says, hi Andreas, I want to thank you for a great job of making build scripts and instructions. Yesterday I built and ran SerenityOS on Windows and I did not meet any issues. Fantastic. That is fantastic. I still remember very well the first time SerenityOS was on Hacker News, and at the time we didn't have any build scripts. So suddenly there were 1,000 people who wanted to try out SerenityOS, and I had no build scripts. I had nothing. I just had some vague instruction. They're like, oh, you will need a cross compiler. Just follow this wiki article to make one. And that was a bit stressful. And then somebody came along and made a script that builds the compiler and linker and all that stuff, and that was amazing. So really, really took a load off the chest there. It was one of the first contributions actually to the system, was somebody making that. So good times. Anyway, let's see. Wait, back up. I missed. Xono says, what's your favorite shows from Cartoon Network? I have not watched Cartoon Network in 20 years, I think. Last time I watched it, I think I was watching Two Stupid Dogs. Was that the name? Two Stupid Dogs? Yeah, I remember watching Two Stupid Dogs. It was a long time ago. Let's see. Gazehound says, least favorite thing about hacking on the Linux kernel in a VM is how long it takes to boot. Serenity comes up in QEMU so fast. Yeah, it is real nice to boot fast, and it's definitely something we want to hold on to for dear life. We don't want to slowly regress that until it slips away from us, right? We have to like we're not going to hold on to it just by wishing. So we need to take some proactive measures, as we were talking about earlier, about maybe reducing the set of processes that launch at startup and things like that. Okay. Let's see. Venkatesh says, I'm interested in email related stuff. Can you recommend anything related to email in Serenity to start with? Well, we have the mail application, which definitely does not get a lot of attention. I don't remember the last time I saw somebody working on mail, but it is right here. Although, oh, I don't have server account configured. Let me see if I can do that. Can I connect to Gmail? No, damn it. I have to. So already here, by the way, like if you try to launch mail and then it says, oh, you need to make some settings before you can launch mail, and then you do the settings, I feel like it should probably launch mail after you make the settings. Oh my goodness, what's my password? That was not it? Okay, I'm not remembering my password apparently. Anyway, yeah, there's a mail application, and it uses, we have an IMAP library, and it uses a web view to display the mail content, and there's probably a million ways you could improve it, so take a look. Bobia says, CSS selector matching seems to have been a slow thing for a while now. Looking forward to seeing it speed up in the future. Yeah, it's a fairly complicated thing to make fast, but there are techniques, and thankfully there's a lot of neat tricks that we can do that I already know pretty well from just having worked on browsers before. So we'll definitely be doing the some of the basic tricks going forward. I'm mostly just concerned with, like, I don't want to complicate the code base with performance tricks that make it harder to hack on. So I'm saving that kind of stuff until we have fewer correctness problems, I guess. But for performance tricks that don't have a huge maintenance impact or that don't complicate the code base much, yeah, those we can just do now. Let's see. Lofty says, didn't realize I was watching live. I would instantly know. I only ever watch videos at 2x speed. Well. Maybe one day in the future you'll be able to watch live streams at 2x speed too. Lofty also says, Serenity has a pixel paint. Does it also have a vector paint or some other named vector graphics editor? It does not. It does not have that. But we've talked about that a little bit recently, about vector graphics and how it would be really neat to have some ability to render vector icons, for example, for emojis, and having our own applications for drawing vector graphics seems like a logical thing that you would also need for that. If anybody's interested in working on vector graphics, definitely don't wait for anybody to give you permission. Just get started. We have a very rudimentary SVG implementation in libweb, but it's extremely naive, and it would be it would be easy to improve it. Let's put it that way. So if anybody's interested in vector graphics, that might be a good place to start. Oops, now I dropped my pen. Thomas Q says, where does the there is no plan mentality come from? I think it comes from me, I guess. I don't have a plan. And the whole approach or way of thinking comes from the addiction recovery community, which is where I picked it up, or at least picked up sort of consciously thinking about things this way. Because in the 12-step communities, it's very often hammered into you that you want to go one day at a time and just focus on the next step in front of you and don't plan far ahead because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. So focusing on the next step instead of trying to think ahead is very helpful for, at least for people like me who at least historically have had a tendency to fumble and stumble and fall if we look too far ahead. And of course, at this point, it's just become a meme of its own in the SerenityOS environment. But that's sort of where it comes from for me, where I learned to go one day at a time. And easy does it, as they say. Okay, let's see. Santee says, since you missed my question earlier, will Ladybird ever run on Windows? Is it a goal at all? I'd love to show it to my friends. So it already should be possible to build it on Windows with WSL. Some people have looked at getting it working on Windows outside of WSL, but I don't know that ever got very far. One issue with, or the big issue with Windows is that it's just very different from the more POSIX-like systems like Serenity, like macOS, like Linux, like the BSDs, Haiku, and so on. Windows is just the odd one out, and they to run natively on Windows, you have to do a lot of things differently, and we don't have a lot of people who are using Windows themselves. There are a handful of people in the Serenity community who use Windows, but for Ladybird to become good on Windows, you would need some people to actively care about making it good, right? So it's absolutely possible that in the future, those people will step up and make it work great on Windows. But at the moment, it is unlikely that it's going to get good on Windows on its own. Like, somebody needs to actively care about it. Senti also says, also, what are the hotkeys you're using to resize and move windows not near the edge? So what I do is I just hold down the Alt key on my keyboard and use the right mouse button to resize the window and the left mouse button to move it around. And then I can grab it anywhere. I don't have to be at the edge. It's awesome. It's perhaps one of the most annoying features to not have in a windowing system once you get used to having it. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Ricardo says, is there a browser wiki like OS Dev Wiki to start learning so I can contribute eventually? Not that I know of, but you don't need to learn from a wiki. You can learn by hacking on stuff. If you open up the code for our browser or for the JavaScript engine, what would we look at, for example? So let me show you something. Let's say that we go to the document class. So this is the DOM document class that you find as document in JavaScript. And you will find we very often have these specification links here that are above a function. And that usually means that this function implements this part of the spec. And if you browse around the web engine and the JavaScript engine, you'll find lots of these links. And you'll see sort of, oh, wait, this is just a C++ implementation of stuff that's in the specification. And here, for example, is the create element algorithm, which you can then open up in your browser and see how they describe it. And now my mouse is not working well. Yeah, so you can find it here, and if you read around in the spec, you'll find other things that we are missing, or if you read the code and compare it to the spec, you'll often find fix-me's like this. And if you find a fix-me like this, you can read the corresponding part of the specification and figure out, oh, wait, what do we need to do to cover this fix-me? Probably that's something you can do. I would say that's a very straightforward and easy way to get started, is to just familiarize yourself with the specifications and see how they map to C++ code, and then you can make little edits and improvements that way. And it's it's a pretty straightforward way to become a browser developer. Let's see. Matteo says, do you use a password manager? I use iOS as my password manager, I guess. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Spooky Potat. Kling Dev Room Tour coming soon. Kling Dev Room Tour. I don't know. There isn't that much in here. I posted a photo of it a long time ago. Let me see if I can find it. Closet. Yeah, it's just a little closet like this. Although the table is now turned 90 degrees to the right, so it's over here instead. But it's not a very exciting tour. Let's see. Oh, am I really far behind? No, I'm not. Okay. Devashish says, 3 times I tried to post a URL, 3 times YouTube deleted it. 3 times I was disappointed. Yeah, that's YouTube for you. They don't like you posting URLs. Rafael says, good morning, Andreas. Thanks for a great video and working. I'm from Brazil. A big hug. Hello, Rafael. Very nice to have you here. And a big hug to you too, I suppose. Let's see. Santi also said, that reminds me, what's the progress on making Serenity boot with low memory? I don't know about progress. I made a video about it a while back and then did some more hacks after that, but haven't actively worked on it since I picked up Ladybird and started working hard on that. But there's definitely more to do in that area. It's just I haven't actively been looking at it for a few weeks. So Devashish was asking if we can load OpenStax in Ladybird. Well, that sounds like something you could find out on your computer, but I don't know what OpenStax is. So let's see if we can load it. OpenStax.org. Let's see. I have a feeling it's gonna not work based on the long white we're getting here. So what we should be seeing is something like this. But we're getting something like this, so that's not good. Yeah, definitely does not load. Need to be investigated. Do we have any JavaScript errors? Generator function. Okay, so it's trying to do trying to use JavaScript generators. Could be a problem, but it could also just be doing a feature detection. But yeah, don't know. Investigation needed. Let's see. Slendy says, doesn't it get hot in there from the computer? Not really. So I've put the computer in a separate closet within the closet. So it's sort of, it was supposed to reduce the noise from the computer, but it also helps with the heat. Although it gets a little warm in the box, but not to the point where it's any kind of a problem. But yes, in theory, it should get hot. Maybe it is hot, and maybe that's why I'm not wearing socks. We'll see. And then let's see. Dun, 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 dun. I feel like I definitely missed things. MSCLRHD said, did you see my comment about the prelude check on font face? YouTube ate my comment, so I left one on the commit itself. I did not see that. Oh, did I screw something up with that? I did not see your Where am I trying to go? Leaving comments on commits. I don't have GitHub notifications turned on, so I will not see these kind of things. If you have comments and you want to reach me about little things, it's much better to just poke me on Discord. What was the prelude? The prelude. That must be prelude here. Yeah, right. So it's still not perfect. Right. It doesn't reject font face rules with an invalid prelude. That's true. But that is a separate issue. Don Bartimo says, how do you solve a problem when you don't even know from where to start? If you don't know from where to start, well, I guess then you just start anywhere. Usually if you don't know where to start with a problem, what you want to do is make the problem simpler. So if you have like a web page like this, for example, I don't know exactly where to start to debug this, but what I would do probably is just try to make the problem simpler. So I can't load this page, right? What's the problem? Is it that something doesn't load, or is it that we can't lay out and display the content? So what I might try to do is save it to a file and then remove networking from the equation and see, okay, well, what if I have this thing as a local file? Can I open it then? So I would get Ladybird and say file, download. Okay, so it actually shows something. So what does this tell us? Well, if we remove networking and possibly some JavaScript execution from the equation, then we can at least display the content. So it's still totally broken, of course, but this tells us something. Now we've simplified the problem, or at least transformed the problem in a way that helps us maybe find a handle on how to attack it. And then what you can do is you can maybe set up a proxy to like proxy the individual requests with Ladybird, and see if there's a particular type of request that we're having trouble with. Or if you imagine that the problem would be a layout issue instead of a networking or JavaScript issue, what you could do here is you could simplify this page and remove everything that's irrelevant and isolate like the specific issue that you want to work on. So in general, how to solve a problem when you don't know where to start is simplifying the problem usually helps if you can do that in any way. Let's see. Spooky Potat says, have you been using ice cream more to help speed up build times? Have you yet added to an alias? So I use ice cream almost every day to speed up my build times. Sometimes I turn off the second computer and then I forget to turn it on, and then I'm not using ice cream because of that. I just turn it off sometimes because it gets a little noisy. But I don't have an alias for it. It's just part of my regular Ninja workflow. Let's see. Malik was saying, is it recommended distro for new joiner Linux like me? You can use any distribution. It matters a lot less which distribution you use. I know that this is an unpopular opinion in some circles, but all the Linux distributions are kind of similar, even though, yes, they have slightly different approaches to configuration and packaging and so on. But at the end of the day, you are using the same software, and it's just different routes to the same destination. So just pick one that seems to do what you want to do. It seems that you seem to get along with the configuration and installation of, and then set it up, and then that's when the journey begins, really. Like messing with the distribution is just a tiny fraction of what being a Linux user is about. in my opinion. I know there are people who feel very differently, but I'm not those people. Senti says, all the Linux distributions are still Linux. Right. Indeed. Josh says, have you ever used FreeBSD? Yes, I have used FreeBSD, NetBSD, OpenBSD, and many other operating systems as well. And those are slightly different from Linux. But even so, even when you're using FreeBSD, once you've set everything up, then it's pretty much the same as using a Linux distribution, because you end up using the same applications, you have the same browser and everything. So it's less different than you might think. Anyway, it seems like we are getting to the end of the stream here. We got a couple more minutes, but I think this was a very productive stream today. Managed to answer a whole bunch of questions, and we even got some technical things. Oh, here, Devashish says, did you get to work on Symbian in Nokia? I never worked directly on Symbian. The closest I ever got was I worked on Qt, which had CI on Symbian. We had to keep it building on Symbian, and we had to keep tests working on Symbian. And I think I broke a Symbian test here and there and had to investigate, but I never worked like primarily on Symbian stuff. I had a lot of coworkers who did, and they were not super excited about Symbian, I guess I would say. It really seemed like one of those things. Even when I started at Nokia in 2009, Symbian was already on its way out, and like people just were ready to move on to other things. Let's see. Josh says, how is RAM usage on Ladybird? It's not great. Could be better. I haven't looked at it recently. Also, how do you even investigate something like that on Linux? I haven't looked at RAM usage on Linux in forever. How do we do this? So Ladybird has resident on, when we load Reddit, we have 678, is that megabytes? 678 megabytes. Resident on this page. That's pretty heavy. Of course, 264 is shared, but there are probably better tools for this that I need to familiarize myself with. I am not super well informed about memory profiling on Linux. I've done a million things with it on Mac and on Serenity, but on Linux, not so much memory work. I know about heap track and Massif and stuff like that, but I don't know. What I would really want is something like the footprint tool on macOS. But I guess I can also write that tool myself. I just need to figure out how Linux reports memory usage. Let's see. That Chris says, are you ever afraid of working on something that someone else may be working on at the same time? Like committing to Git and breaking something they're doing and vice versa? No, not really. I mean, at least in Serenity, the project is so large that it's, at least with the current amount of people working on it, it's kind of unlikely that that you would step on each other. But it has happened a few times that two people did the same thing, but it's very rare because there's just so many things to do that it's unlikely that two people would do the same thing. Slendy says, wait, you can turn on color in top? Yes, you can. Press the Z button and it turns on color. Amazing. Oh, Jeja is right here. Just joined myself for the last few minutes of office hours. Hello, Jeja, how's it going? Santi says, I just noticed you accept BAT donations. Nice. Oh, right. I set that up like 3 years ago or something. Somebody told me somebody told me that I need to click a box that says that I accept those. So I did, but I never did anything with that. Should probably go look at it. Let's see. S. Salur says, why is it trying to create a new language instead of eliminating the deficiencies of C++? Is there a reason for this? Well, C++ is developed by a committee that follows a very rigorous standardization process. So if you want to eliminate all the deficiencies of C++, you have to go through the process of convincing all of the billion-dollar companies that are stakeholders in the C++ standard to go along with your changes. So that is very expensive and probably not something that could even be done given how many millions and millions of lines of code that people have already that they want to keep working. So I think C++, you can't really fix it. You can only keep iterating on it. Angus says, I've been learning more about C++ recently and the cost of RTTI. I was wondering if with Serenity being 0.0, all the virtual functions in Serenity make any performance impact. Well, virtual functions are a tool, right? And it's definitely something that it's more expensive to do a virtual dispatch than it is to do a static dispatch, of course, because you're doing indirect call, but it's not tremendously useful as a sort of a dogmatic rule to say like, oh, you should never do virtual calls because they're more expensive than static calls. But it's something to be aware of. So when it comes to the day when you're looking at a profile that says, oh, this thing is really slow, and then you look at it and the only thing you can find in it that might be slow is, oh, well, it's doing a virtual call that we could easily turn into a static call. That's, in my experience, that's when that sort of thing comes into play. 99% of the time, it's totally irrelevant if you're using virtual functions or not. They're not slow enough to matter. And very few times have I seen any kind of performance issue where the fact that somebody was doing virtual dispatch was the real problem. Typically, the real problem is not that you're doing virtual dispatch, but that you're doing virtual dispatch 1,000,000 times. And you could also do virtual dispatch 100 times instead by reorganizing the code somehow, right? And in Serenity, it has never been the case that we've found, at least I personally have not found something where a virtual call was the source of a performance problem. Alexander Gusas says, how does the guard else return differ from if not? This, we really need to make an FAQ about this. This has been answered so many times. It differs. Let me show you. Let me open up Yakt. It differs. Oh, shoot. I haven't been in VS Code for a few days here, as you can see. Okay, let me just write some code. So we make an enum that has some types. And then let's create one of them. So now, if I were to say something like guard E is a foo, else return. What I accomplish here is that it's indeed an a, so I will bind the name foo will now contain the value 1, 2, 3, right? And thanks to guard, I can use foo down here because guard allows the bindings to continue to exist after the else block. With if not, it does not work because foo here does not exist. It goes out of scope. So that is in my view, like the big, super useful thing about guard, that it allows you to create bindings that persist after the closing bracket here. And it just swallows a whole level of indentation that you, otherwise, if you wanted to do this with if, you would have to say if e is a foo, and then you would have to access foo in here. So you're increasing the indentation and you're sliding towards the right of the screen, right? That is a big difference. And of course, another difference that I should mention is that you must return, or you must exit the current scope when you are in the else part of a guard. So it's not allowed to just fall through. You have to actually exit, whether you exit via break or continue or return. But that's something that you know, that when a guard happens, then you know that if the else branch is taken, then you always exit the scope. But the binding thing is by far my favorite feature about guard, and we're using it super much throughout the Yakt compiler to reduce indentation. Anyway, it's 6 o'clock, and that means that the stream is over. So thank you all very much for coming to office hours. I really appreciate it, all the company, the questions, and thank you for the super chats and all of the great questions and everything else. And what is it, the thing that I always say? Right. If you end up working on SerenityOS this weekend, or on Yakt, or on Ladybird, do come hang out with us on the Discord server and share what you're working on, because programming is a lot more fun when you're doing it with your friends. And that's exactly what we do in the SerenityOS community, just programming with friends. So hope to see you all there, and have a great weekend regardless. See you all next time. Bye.